All right, let's do an update on if you're born in 1960 and your social security info. So remember, we've done a lot of videos and topics using Andrew Biggs' research from AEI, that's the American Enterprise Institute, talking about how your average wage index could be greatly impacted by declining GDP growth of the economy for 2020. We got good news on the horizon here. Good news. And so Andrew's assertion, and correctly actually, and we've all learned from Andrew Biggs. And new merch, by the way, 556-762. Coffee cups in my store down below. If you want to support me, buy some merch. And it tastes good. This makes drinking a 556 cup of coffee makes it taste divine. All right. So anyway, if we look at Andrew Biggs, he says, look, man, you got the average wage index. Sorry about my hair. You got the average wage index, which is based on what the economy is doing in the year in which you turn 60. So if you're born in 1960, this is the year you turn 60. If the average wage index is reduced for this year, it reduces all the previous 35 years for which they use your Social Security. It's crazy, to be honest. Actually, it ticks me off. You think about it, you freaking slave away for 35, 40 years. Yes, I know they only use 35 and your average index monthly earnings. I get that. But still, you're slaving away in Social Security. They're using your top 35 years of earnings. They index those with inflation, or in this case, average wage index, and that comes up with your primary insurance amount. Well, I'm not going to go into that. I've got 8 million videos on that. But what I'm saying is, so you do that, slave, and then you come into a commie virus where the government is mandating closures across the world, which is freaking nuts because 0.1% of the people are at risk of death, and everybody's freaking out. And now we got an economy that for the Q1 was down 5% annualized. Q2 was down 35% annualized. Now that is not, Q1 was not down 5%. That'd be about 1.25. Q2 is probably be about 8.5, right? Yeah, about 8.5. So we have total decline about 10% so far this year. And that's going to have a great impact on, most likely, on average wage index, which is run about probably September, mid-September, something like that, based on the numbers through, I think Andrew was saying, end of August, end of September. Yeah, I think it's actually the end of August, actually, is when they're using maybe it's the end of September, I can't remember. But it's based on the numbers that are kind of going into the Q3. All right, so Q3 is quarter three. What's the economic conditions off the negative 1.25 in Q1, the negative 7.5 in Q2? What's the economic conditions from there? If the economic conditions are flat, which as many thought was going to happen in Q3, that would stop the bleeding in Q3. That means when they did the AWI, and this might sound confusing, but it's critically important to understand. So if you're not following this, watch my other videos on this, or just read Andrew Biggs from AEI, American Enterprise Institute. It's nuts, man. Anyway, so if we had a decline, and a flattening, then when they kind of came up with the numbers, they'd say, oh man, this is bad. Sucks to be you. You're born in 1960, but you're going to have a pretty significant reduction in Social Security. We're talking like 5,000 or 6,000 a year. Crazy. For the rest of your life, too, not just in 1 year. But thankfully, it looks like that might not happen as bad as what we initially thought. So here's First Trust Economics blog, Consumer Price Index, and you can see a healthy bump in July. Healthy. CPI rose 0.6%, which is off of June as well. So healthy bumps in CPI, Consumer Price Index, not deflationary, not recessionary, inflationary for sure. And 2 straight months of 0.6% increase in CPI, which means AWI, which is going to be a lot of the similarities to our average wage index, will play a big role here. So I have a sneaky suspicion the risk that we were dealing with at the beginning of going into May or something, maybe late June, May, late April, May, when Andrew wrote his article. I think it ticks me off is all these other also rans are coming on. Motley Fool, Market Watch, they're all writing reports now talking about the how your Social Security could pummel you because you're born in 1960. It's like, dude, where have y'all been, man? And they don't credit Andrew for his research is part. No one even came close. Andrew Biggs wrote the freaking research that everyone is now piggybacking on, but they're not crediting Andrew Biggs. Ticks me off, because if that guy did not write it, there would be no stories on that, the reality of the world. But thankfully, Andrew Biggs did. And so it's just, I can't stand piggybacking on other people's research and not giving them credit for it. Anyway, so you can see here, yesterday's report on producer prices, which are up. Consumer prices also posted consensus gains, above consensus gains, rising 0.6% for the second month in a row. Not recessionary, not deflationary, certainly inflationary, which is exactly what we want if you're born in 1960 for Social Security. Let's see. Energy prices rose 2.5%, which is good. Look, we want energy to be cheap, but in this case, right now, we need energy prices to rise, because that was really, really putting a hurting unit on the overall CPI. The energy prices dropping was not good, because that, again, we're talking about for Social Security beneficiaries. Oh, that's some good coffee. All right. 0.4% decline in food prices was largely driven by the food at home category, which fell 1.1%, as Americans became less reliant on grocery stores for their meals and supply chains finally caught up with demand. No one else talked about this until I saw my man at the Conservative Treehouse, where he showed you how a supply chain worked. He basically got the producers going to distributors, and then it's like a fork in the road. You got eat at home and eat away from home. So it goes like this: produce, and then forks. Eat at home, eat away from home. Eat at home is literally eating at home, and eating away at home is eating at retail shops. You go to school, you got your cafeteria, you got the hostel cafeteria. You're going to restaurants, whatnot. The issue is the supply chains are geared towards both of these very specific eating at home or eating away. They took away eat away from home. They took that away. They shut everything down, and the supply chain did not have the capacity to move everything to eat at home. As such, the prices went up, and it only makes sense, because think about it. There's only so many gallon jugs that have been produced to provide a gallon of milk. But if you provide it a wholesale for eat away from home, you're going to have 5 and 10 gallon jugs. I'm just using that for an example. Well, it's not easy to transition from 5 or 10 gallon jugs to 1 gallon jugs for the retail market. You can't just snap your fingers and all of a sudden produce all that stuff. So because of that, the supply chain was there's a huge glut in the eat. There's no, glut's not the right word, but there's a huge decline in the eat away from home. There's nothing there. And yet all the producers who normally supply that, they are sitting on product, but they had no supply chain in which to deliver it to. So they had to focus on eat at home, but the eat at home market did not have the products to get that. The produce was there, the demand was there, but they didn't have the chain to make that match. Like, again, going back to gallon jugs of milk. They had the milk, they had the demand, but they didn't have what was needed to put that demand, that product into the demand. They didn't have it. So now we're starting to get that back with restaurants. And don't forget things like fish and lobster and all that, crabs. The bulk of that, the bulk of that stuff is eat away from home. It's not eat at home. And so all these guys out there, lobstermen, fishermen, and whatnot, producing this, they're selling it for the wholesale market to restaurants, who can then turn around and sell it retail to you as you come in. When those restaurants are closed, they got all this product, they have nowhere to sell it, which is why we saw a significant decrease in prices of that kind of stuff, because they had all the product, but you had to actually go to the dock to get it. Anyway, it's crazy, a decline in supply chains. And I didn't know that until my man at the Sundance at the Conservative Treehouse pointed it out. It's pretty interesting. All right. Meanwhile, measures like industrial production. All right. However, let's see. We expect prices will continue to rise in the months ahead toward a 2 to 3% annual pace of inflation that was in effect before the coronavirus wreaked havoc on global economies. Actually, the coronavirus did not wreak havoc on global economies. It was the reaction to the global coronavirus that did. However, underlying fundamentals point to a higher risk of rising inflation than during the 2008 recession. Again, that would be good for COLA, cost of living adjustments, when it comes to Social Security. The coronavirus pandemic is the first recession on record where personal income has actually risen due to government stimulus checks. Meanwhile, measures like industrial production and the unemployment rate demonstrate the actual production of goods and services remain depressed relative to pre-pandemic levels. That mismatch between supply and demand will eventually mean too many dollars chasing too few goods, especially if further stimulus measures continue to lean on the same policy. So we don't have enough people in the manufacturing of product, but we have actually more income because of the we actually have more income because of government measures of stimulus and whatnot to buy less product, if that makes sense. We have more demand and less supply. That's inflationary for sure. That said, it's clear the economic recovery has begun. The worst economic quarter in the world, the post-World War II era, is behind us, and the question is how quickly we recover. All right, so that's good stuff. So, you know, if you're born in 1960, this is good news for you when it comes to Social Security. Love to hear your thoughts. We'll see you guys.